In the kitchen. So this whole section will be about in the kitchen. The kitchen was a building in the castle grounds. All the meals were made there. Meat was roasted over a fire on a stick called a spit. This is how part of a castle kitchen might have looked. So you can see the different, how they stored their food, their cooking pots. So probably very different than the kitchen that you have. Oh, we have another how-to. Step 1, to bake bread, bakers lit a fire in an oven to heat it up. 2, they mixed dough for bread and made it into loaves. 3, the loaves went into the oven when the fire died down. 4, the oven was still hot, so the bread soon cooked. And this is another text box to give you extra information. Castles didn't have refrigerators, so food went bad quickly. Cooks added spices to disguise the horrible taste. And now fabulous feasts. So a feast is like a giant meal. Huge meals, called feasts, were served in the great hall of the castle. Important guests sat at a high table. Everyone else sat on long benches. Okay, here's another text box. There were no forks in castle times. People usually ate with their fingers. People ate lots of meat and fish. Cooks decorated food with feathers and fruit. Amazing models made of sugar and paper were carried in to impress the guest. So I guess this is an example of their model made from sugar and paper. They had a lot of time on their hands. Okay, so this section is going to be about knights because that's what the heading is. Knights were rich, important soldiers. They helped to protect castles against enemies. Here's a text box. Knights had shapes or pictures on their shields. Each knight had his own pattern. First, a knight put on a thick padded vest. Over this, he wore a shirt made of metal. Metal plates covered his arms, legs, and chest. Then he put on a long top and big gloves. He wore a heavy metal helmet on his head. He carried a wooden shield to protect him. So in each of these, you see the picture, and then you have the caption under it, and the captions describe what that picture is about. At a joust. A joust was a pretend fight between two knights. The knights held long poles called lances. They rode on strong horses called chargers. Here's a text box. The winner of a joust got a prize. Sometimes he won the losing knight's horse and weapons. The two knights charged up to each other on a narrow track. Each knight tried to push the other one off his horse with the lance. The knight who was able to stay on his horse was the winner. Attack. Okay, so earlier I had you infer why they would want their castle to be up high and have those thick walls and a moat and guards at the drawbridge. So let's read about this whole section about attack. Sometimes castles were attacked. Enemies often used a machine called a catapult. Soldiers pulled a big lever back. 2, they loaded it with heavy rocks. 3, then they let the lever spring up. 4, the rocks hit the castle walls. Here's a text box. Enemies often catapulted dead animals into castles to spread diseases. This old painting shows a huge battle in front of a castle as enemies try to take it over. So if they're trying to take it over, they want to take the castle for themselves. So people needed to protect their property, so they had all those defense mechanisms set up in place. Fighting back. Soldiers tried to keep their castles safe from enemies. They dropped rocks or boiling water onto the heads of enemies who came near. This text box says, sometimes enemies tried to sneak into castles in disguise. The soldiers were armed with bows and sharp arrows. They fired arrows through the slits in the wall. So they look like little windows, but with no glass in it. And it was just big enough for them to put their weapons to fight off the enemies. This castle has many arrow slits in its walls. Soldiers also shot arrows from the roof. is heading Castles in Ruins. Most castles are now empty. They have crumbled over the years. This is how Raglan castles in Wales might have looked 400 years ago. This is how the castle looks now. So that's a drawing to show you what it might have looked like, and then this is what's left over. They're very old, and with weather and other natural disasters, fighting, they're not in good shape anymore, and they've crumbled and they're unlivable. Some castles were destroyed by enemies and attacks. This tower was blown up, but part of it still stands. So you can see part of it. And here's a text box. A few castles have been rebuilt for people to live in. Okay, so when we're talking about features of a nonfiction text, another one we have is the glossary. We've talked a lot about what the glossary is, so think really quick, what's the purpose of a glossary? The glossary is like a dictionary. It gives you the word and then the definition. And in this glossary for this book, it has a picture with the word and the definition. So in this book, we have keep, drawbridge, falcon, feast, shield, joust, and catapult. And then this gives you other websites to visit. And then we also talk about the index. So think for a second, what is the purpose of the index? And the index gives you words that you can look for and then what page to locate that. So if you're wanting to learn more about, say, knights, you can read about knights on pages 20, 21, 22 through 23. So the index will tell you specific words, subjects, and then what pages that they are located on. So these are different features of the nonfiction text that we have studied and practiced. And when you're reading these types of books, it is important to read all the parts. If it's in words, you need to read it. The heading, the text box, the labels, the captions, because all of it will help you understand the content of the story. So I hope that you enjoyed learning about castles today as we reviewed our features of a nonfiction text.